Hi, I'm Ben, and welcome to Field Foley episode 22. My guest today is Sergio Ronchetti, a maestro in the art of sonic storytelling within the gaming universe. As a composer and sound designer, he infuses games with soulful narratives. His expertise lies in crafting adaptive music, synchronizing with gameplay, and immersive sound design. He also shares valuable insights into FMOD through concise and useful tutorials on his YouTube channel. If you're working in game implementation with FMOD, these videos are a must-watch. So, Sergio, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you. What an intro. I feel so honored almost.
And I didn't even mention your love of metal yet.
No, you didn't. So you missed that. That's a bad mark already. That's a bad start.
Yeah. Already incomplete.
Yeah.
No, I'd like to start this interview by getting everyone involved, because a lot of people that are not in the audio field are listening to this. So can you maybe briefly explain what audio implementation for video games is?
Sure. So I always tell students now, like, the minimum that we should know, the thing that we're expected to know now, whether you're a composer or a sound designer, is what middleware is, right? What audio middleware is and what it does. Mm-hmm. And that's, for me, the first stage of implementation. So we've created our music, created our sounds, our sound effects, and then we stage them essentially in this middleware, this middle software, this staging platform between our DAW and the game engine, hence the word middleware. Things like FMOD and Wise. And in there, we get to be more than just, putting the sound into the game, but we get to be creative. We get to create the adaptive systems. We get to implement adaptive systems, adaptivity, which is what video games are all about. And from there, that's where we connect it to the game, test things out, and then go back to our initial process and keep revising. So that's the beginning of it. And of course, implementation goes way further than what I focus on and what I've come to learn. Things like scripting and integration, all the technical stuff that you can go even further with. Basically, that's not something that I do in my everyday work. It's not something that's ever interested me. I don't think I'm clever enough to understand code, and or maybe I'm just getting lazy in my old 30-year-old age. But that's as far as my process goes.
Yeah, I understand your pain with getting lazy about learning new coding stuff. I started as a programmer, so I have the added benefit of having at least the basics of programming. I'm a little bit more of the basics, but still, it's learning new coding languages or new styles of coding is a whole beast in itself. And this middleware, I think, is something where it's so cool to have these options of doing dynamic things without being a coder, essentially. And
absolutely,
yeah. Maybe we can also go a bit about the topic of adaptive music. How would you describe what adaptive music is?
Adaptive music. Okay, so I was speaking to Jonas Turner a while ago about this topic, and it was because he mentioned something very interesting. He said he plays a lot of games where there is either really great music or there's great video game music, if that makes sense. I'm paraphrasing terribly, but he mentioned it in a really concise way. But basically, he's trying to say that sometimes there are games with fantastic music and it works really well, and then other times there are actually games with music written for the game, if that makes sense. And I like that distinction, because coming from where scoring for picture came, it came from the world of film, and then it adapted itself, integrated itself into video games when they came about however long later. We have to change our mentality. It's not just creating great music that describes the scene, but it's creating music that anticipates what a player is going to do. Because we don't know what players are going to do. I might spend half an hour in a level, whereas you might spend 5 minutes, for instance. And the music has to, hopefully, work for both of our experiences. That's on a really simple level. Obviously, take that to the nth degree, and then you get stuff that really describes what you're doing in the gameplay. And that makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel like you're really affecting this universe, this world that you're virtually experiencing. So it's nice to think about film when we're talking about video game music, because it's the easiest way to differentiate it, right? And to describe it. Film is very linear, it's very start and stop. You know where the music is going to go. And within that, you can pour a lot of emotion, a lot of creativity within that. That's a really cool limitation. And then on the other side of it, there are games now which really make use of the adaptivity because they don't know where it's going to end, right? And that's also like a really interesting limitation if you think about it. So adaptivity for me starts 100% in the middleware. Understanding how the middleware works, at the very least, is essential for you to understanding how to write better video game music, as opposed to music that's going to go in a video game, if you understand the difference. And it's the reason, for instance, people like, Mick Gordon, for instance, demo all of their adaptive systems and musical loops in a Wise project before they send it off to their developers, so the developers can see exactly what they're thinking, whether they're going to recreate it or implement it themselves afterwards.
Absolutely, yeah. I've recently seen a very nice behind the scenes of the Hogwarts Legacy final boss fight music, and it wasn't that complex, but it really showcased this like adaptive approach into how the music was structured and how you have those, for example, that there is at least a certain amount of time a player will be in a phase of a boss fight, because you won't like just one shot him and kill him in like 2 seconds. So you have a bit of time to make those transitions really shine when something happens on screen or you have cutscenes. And that was really interesting to see that. And but yeah, it goes even further than that. If you think about, for example, Zelda Breath of the Wild was something where it was really popular, and people really started to notice that if you're at a certain height, the music changes accordingly. Maybe other instruments come in, also, of course, with the weather.
Wow.
And you couldn't essentially have a score on a CD and say, this is the score of the game, because depending on how you move through that world, the score changes, instruments come and go, styles change. And it's just, yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't know that. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I've never really been a Zelda fan. I've played like an hour of each, maybe, just to understand it. But that's a really cool example of how music can, add and enhance what the gameplay is doing. Something that, again, films can't do. And again, understanding that is like I said, I really truly believe the first step is understanding how Wise and FMOD can put your music into the game, right? Because they inform each other. I feel like they inform each other. It's a common mistake to think that we should write all of our music first and then in the second half of the project do all of the implementation, right? Put it in the game afterwards. And because, you might find something, might realize that something that you originally wrote doesn't now work in the game because you didn't anticipate for, I don't know, a gameplay mechanic working in a different way. So it's way more the case that you write a tiny bit of music, you implement it as soon as possible, see how it works, and then go back and inform your decision, your creative process again, and just keep that loop going, essentially.
Yeah, I'm gonna link something in the show notes about the Zelda music, so you can check that out, and also for the listeners, because it's I think it's a perfect example of how open world games should at least behave, because
Awesome.
When you have those like really massive worlds where you could spend hundreds of hours, I think there should at least be something like this implemented always to create something unique and to not make you like after 20 hours or something say, oh, there's this loop again. Now I'm in this situation again. Oh, this combat loop again. So that's something that where we can really shine as sound implementers, I would say. And connecting to that, how did you first get into the whole realm of audio implementation and especially FMOD?
So specifically sound design. Okay, I'll go back a little bit more. I started playing metal music, which you failed to mention at the start, but I've forgiven you already, don't worry. I started playing in many bands basically since the age of like 14, 15, since I discovered my uncle here in Spain's extensive discography of music, not just metal, but that was the thing that I latched onto as an angry, angsty teenager, stuff from like Metallica to Slayer to Megadeth, all the classics, and then it kind of went a little bit south when I started listening to Nickelback quite a lot. And then it came back around when I started playing in metal bands, late teens, early 20s. I did that for a while. And basically within that time frame, I remember we used to have, these little like jam nights where we just hang out and we'd play music and then we'd play video games together. Video games were always there, like always. Like just, I don't know, maybe it's a generational thing, but video games have always been a staple of like my free time and you know, hanging with friends and stuff like that. And there was one night where we were playing a game called Dead Space. And we played it in like the practice shed or studio, if you will, like all the lights out. And basically everybody kind of caved in. They all went to bed or whatever. So I was the last one standing playing this game, like absolutely bricking it because it was just at the time the scariest thing I've ever played, the most tense thing. And I remember at one point walking down a corridor and thinking, why is this so scary? Like nothing is jumping out at me. Like, why am I so tense? Am I remembering something from before? And then I think that was the first initial example of me doing like deep listening and being like, actually, there is something. There's an ambience. There's some weird violin texture, and it's super subtle. But like I stood still for the first time in a game, like ever, and was like, wow, that must be somebody's job, right? To create this sound, this ambience. And so I guess my head started like, you know, thinking about games in that sense, being like, oh, somebody has to do that. It's not just the music. It's you take it for granted, completely take it for granted. And I think it's funny now because everybody I talk to who's now a sound designer, I ask them like, you know, you ask the question, how did you get into sound design? It's like, oh, well, you know, when I was 5 years old, everybody wanted to be, you know, a fire person, a firefighter or a you know, an astronaut, but I wanted to be a sound designer. It's like, no, nobody even knows what a sound designer is, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like we all get there through like other audio means, if that makes sense, music and stuff like that. So that was the first instance. And then anyway, long story short, I decided that being broke and traveling and being uncomfortable was not the lifestyle I wanted to live. So I ended up going to uni and trying to realign myself by just doing a music degree and with the intention of being a composer, because I thought I am sick of playing in a band with other people. I don't know how to control my own ego and other egos, so I just want to write on my own and see how that goes for a while. And then video games came first, basically.
That's awesome. And what inspired you then to start your tutorial series, especially the FMOD stuff? I just have to say, those are basically the videos I found you from, because I was searching from something very specific in FMOD and I found your videos and they were so good because it's like 2 minutes to the point, just a solution to a problem. And it's like, yeah, I'm going through all of them now because I hope I find something new every day, and I do. So
Wow.
First of all, thank you.
Wow, thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. It's thank you for that, and I'm always glad to hear that people find it useful. I didn't think that people would find it this useful, really, because to begin with, I did it for two reasons, if I'm being honest. One of them is I think it's very important for self-promotion in every sense of the word. Like, I think we're very lucky that in the game audio community, it really is that. It feels like a community. And I think places like Air Wiggles, for instance, really, emphasize that idea that we are all helping each other. There's no like gatekeeping, at least not in game audio, which is great. So part of it is to give back to the community because we get back what we give. Like, for instance, we're now having this chat, and I don't think that would have happened, at least not now, unless I made that video, for instance. And vice versa. I probably wouldn't have known who you are if I hadn't seen your your podcast popping up every now and then. So one of them is that. One of them is contributing to the community. The other side of it is also self-promotion, because potential clients, not just audio people, potential clients also see me putting up these videos. And although they've never, I doubt any of them have actually watched the video unless they're specifically looking for something about FMOD, they just see that I'm active, that I'm contributing to the realm of game audio. And that shows that I'm being perceived as an authority, I guess, in that sense. Even though I know maybe, and you know that maybe it's very basic stuff. I'm just repeating what the manual says just in video form, because that was the third point. I got sick of reading manuals.
Me too, man.
I'm way more of a visual and audio person. That's why we work in video games, right?
Yeah.
So that was the other. And then the last point was just because I realized I'm using FMOD a lot more lately, and I can't explain every single part of it. So wouldn't it be cool if I went through as many features as I possibly could and just explain them as simply as possible? And thinking of the things that maybe when I started, nobody really taught me or nobody really explained to me, and I kind of took for granted. So that's it really. And it's reinforcing my learning. It's reinforcing how I get to teach. I also like making them. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's a really I think in the past I've been like really wary of tutorials because usually when I was searching for something, it doesn't matter if it was like FMOD or something else, you find these 10-15 minute videos where it's like this whole YouTube shtick about who I am, what my channel is, promotion, maybe an advertisement, and
Sure.
what you really want is like this 1 minute of content. And so this was very refreshing to see, and I hope this we return to this format, um, especially in like tutorials more and more in the future because yeah, like you
Mm.
said, it's just a community thing, and the audio community is amazing. So
Mm.
yeah, that's a good place to start. And yeah, when you're going through like the FMOD features or through a specific feature, how do you like approach doing a video? Do you have like you have a certain situation that you found a solution to, and then that could be a video, or do you really like have a plan and go through all the topics, all the features?
Good question. So, I mean, up until now, because I've got many more planned, but up until now, I've been focusing on the stuff that I think people should know as soon as they open FMOD for like the first time, right? So,
Mm.
starting with, for instance, explaining the spatializer, how that works. And I think I've got a couple videos so far, like explaining how to make sounds 3D and what FMOD actually does versus what is true 3D, for instance, things that we take for
Mm.
granted. And I think that's important to understand because then we understand where we can move on from that, right? Understanding the limitations of our software, for instance, or understanding what is perceived as, for instance, three-dimensional when in reality it's not technically fully 3D, but that's fine because I think that also teaches an important lesson that it's more about the way it sounds in the final product, not how you got there and what you did to get there. Really, all that matters is that it sounds good at the end. So I'm starting with that, starting with the basic topics that I wish, for instance, I knew straight away. And then after that, yeah, every now and then I come up with a cool little tidbit or something from a project that I've worked on or something that I've seen somebody else do. For instance, I put in stuff there from one of the projects I worked with Fallen Flag called Elder Souls. I put like something, it was like, this is what I did in Elder Souls, and I wish I did this because
Mm.
now, 3-4 years later, I know way more. And I like that because I think it's a nice lesson to remember that, we can only do our best with the abilities and the experience and talent that we have in this moment. And we should feel fine with letting go and just appreciating that, yeah, next year you can definitely do a better job. But that's not the point. That's, this is where we are right now. So that's where I'm starting. And then I'm kind of just leading from there. I'm also, I think the main focus is just explaining to people that I think FMOD in many cases can be underutilized. It can be used, like I said, just as a staging platform, which I think is the wrong way to think about it. I think we should be doing way more inside of FMOD and not be afraid of CPU expenses, right? Because that's the common thing. Like developers don't want us to use too much CPU, but in reality, I think audio uses a very, very tiny amount. I think we could afford to be given a little bit more, more wiggle room in that sense.
It's just like in the past when we would fight for memory.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, yeah. And in your opinion, do you have some common challenges that new developers have in audio implementation? Is there something where it's like this question pops up all the time, or this issue, or is it like implementation in general? Is like people are, yeah, I know how to do sounds, but now I have to do implementation. Oh my God, is it coding?
God, yeah, that's always the question. I'm not sure if I want to learn implementation. It's like, and it is scary, I get it, but it's I'd say the main thing is just understanding the workflow, understanding that it has to be a part of your creative process, and you have to inject it as soon as possible because it's going to change the way that you think. It's, for instance, in FMOD we can layer things. We can allow FMOD to do the heavy lifting for us. The same with Wise. We don't have to create now 20 individual variations in our DAWs and then bake them and print them, export them, whatever, individually. That takes forever. Nowadays, I can come up with a sound that I really like. For instance, a footstep that's made out of the shoe material, the surface material, and then, I don't know, a layer of Foley for like the clothing, right? So that's 3 layers sitting on top of each other. Once I'm happy with one of the sounds, I then have to make sure that I have, I don't know, 10 variations of the shoe, 10 variations of the surface, and 10 of the Foley. And I can put each of them into their own individual multi-random container inside middleware like FMOD, and then FMOD gives me the variations by itself. Like every time it gets pressed, every time it's played, it gives me a new variation. That's using middleware in the right way. That's saving me time, and also making it better because it's going to make more It's going to give me more flexibility to, for instance, change the timing of one of the layers, bring the foot the shoe a little bit earlier than the Foley, for instance. And I can do that within seconds compared to going back in my DAW, re-editing it, re-exporting it, put it in FMOD, So yeah, that's the main thing. Understanding the workflow, the power of the workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe something to add to that, you can also use those, for example, the Foley layer is a good example. You have this Foley layer of movement, maybe it's like a leather jacket or whatever it is, and you can reuse that for other sounds as well. So you can have your layer and not use it just for the footsteps, but also for other sounds if this fits. So you can mix and match layers and can save on some sounds even.
Right. I wish somebody told me that at the start, Ben, right?
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh no, it's lazy. I have to make it from scratch, every single sound. It's like, no way. Things are reused all the time in video games, especially when it comes to AAA. They'll just have a big box titled, Foley. Use it as you will, like cloth Foley, leather Foley, and that's it. You just mix it in differently. Again, it's not about not necessarily the way you get there, but as long as the end result sounds good, and like nobody's questioning, people reusing Foley in Red Dead Redemption. Like nobody notices that stuff, right? It sounds good.
And it's even like it even fits then with the style, because if you make too many different variations, you tend to like maybe go overboard, and then maybe it isn't concise anymore. So if you have those like this big pack of Foley sounds and you use it for everything where you need those Foley movement sounds for the same character, then you have like a real language and a sound style that stays consistent over the turn of the game.
Yeah, so important. Yeah. So important.
Maybe on the other side of the development cycle, for developers, is there something that you would wish like game developers to understand more about adaptive audio and audio implementation?
Yes, I think there's still a stigma around like using middleware, especially with perhaps indie projects. They get a little bit scared when they have to pay for another license, and I get it. I don't envy their position. There's a lot to organize in making a video game, and making sure the team functions on time. You actually finish making the video game, which is a miracle every time it happens. So we should applaud that for sure. So I get it. There's a little bit of like uncertainty and like, oh, I don't want to pay another license. Like, can we get around it? Do we have to use middleware? And it's a little hard to convince them without giving them the years of experience that maybe we've had using it, and understanding how great it is. So that's the thing I wish maybe developers maybe were clued up on. But it's also, I guess, down to us to make sure that we deliver and that we prove that worth. That we show them, like, if you trust me to do the work, then this is the tool, this is the paintbrush that I'm going to use to paint this picture, And if I don't use this, it's going to be nowhere near the quality that attracted you in the first place to working with me, basically. So that's, I guess, the thing that I wish people understood. So I'm hoping, for instance, again, putting out more videos about FMOD, just so people get familiar with hearing this word, hearing Ys, hearing FMOD, so they see it as part of the workflow, as a necessity, as opposed to an extra. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the first time I've worked with FMOD and learning that you can like run the game and change something in FMOD and at the same time, that was like, just like live debugging. It's so awesome. And also for the developer, of course. I mean, I can change sound, add some sounds to the events if they're integrated already. I don't have to touch the project in any way. We don't get in conflict with each other. I can just like fine tune stuff. And when the project gets checked out next, everything is in there and sounds better already. So that is always something that hopefully developers learn to understand. That it's not just like, it not just makes it better sounding experience. It's also, the workflow is also way better, and you don't step on each other's toes. You don't have to do that much work.
Yes, absolutely. It's hard to quantify how much money you save. And by the way, like most licenses, any developers listening to this, most licenses for F1 now are free unless you go into like the stratosphere with your budget. So it's not really an issue anymore. But even if you had to pay for it, it's hard to quantify how many hours you would spend of your own time or of your programmer's time to create the systems that I would ask you to do without F1, things that I can do within hours. It's really hard to, and I think that's the main thing. Like, so that's the way I explain it. I've worked on projects with and without middleware now, and I just explain it like that. Like, if you don't want to use middleware, that's fine, but understand that you're going to have to be doing a lot more work at the end of it, because I'm still going to ask you to do the systems that I think that we need.
Yeah.
Having said that, I mean, not every game requires middleware. Some games, maybe mobile games, perhaps in certain cases, I'd imagine isn't that big a deal if you didn't use middleware, if it's quite straightforward. But yeah.
Yeah. And how do you stay updated on the newest technologies and the latest developments? Like, do you read new feature lists if an update comes for FMOD, or is it something where it's like, oh, if I stumble over it, it's okay. If not, I have enough to explore already.
I think it's the latter. I think there's so much to explore that's already out there that you're almost playing catch up every now and then.
Yeah.
I think it comes back down to community, I'd say, actually, like, attending conferences, attending online meetups, and having conversations like we're having now that could, direct us in a new direction, a new area to learn, something that maybe you've never heard of, that somebody else has used. And what I particularly like about FMOD is that it really feels like a sandbox for creating, many different possible pathways to the same solution. So I'll create something, and I often now, last year anyway, I have to start them back up again. We were doing like little mini FMOD mastermind groups with a couple people, and just being like, look, this is the thing that I want to try and do in FMOD, like this challenge, like how do we do it? And like just screen sharing and being like, oh, try this, try that. And kind of like throwing the baton as if you will, like back and forth, and being like, this is what I would do, or this is how you can make that even more efficient,
That's awesome.
Yeah, that really helps. So, but as far as like new softwares and stuff, I watch a lot of videos. I watch a lot of Akash's videos, Akash the car, if anybody's not familiar, but they should be. Following the right people, but just making sure you're in the community, because I think it doesn't feel incredibly big or like unattainable to like understand like how big our community is, if that makes sense, which is nice. It feels quite intimate. So as long as you're in, a couple of the main circles, for instance, like the Discord servers, going to online meetups, Airwiggles, again, I have to mention it again because it's a great place again, to meet other people in the same field. As long as you're in there, you should be hearing about things that people are trying out and experimenting with. Maybe I'm not the best person to ask. Maybe I'm not always keeping up with it, but I think playing catch up, I think, is what I'm doing, Ben. As long as it suits what I'm doing at the moment, I think I'm satisfied, I guess, until I have a problem and then I ask.
Yeah, I'm the same essentially. If I have a problem, I'm looking for a solution, or if I see something that's interesting, I might recall that later and use it for a certain situation. But I'm not also like trying to be on the cusp of everything, because I don't think that's my kind of style. I like people that are like always trying to get the newest technology and trying to find out what you can do with that. But I don't think that's maybe it's our age. We are old men.
I know.
We are set in our ways.
I'm only half joking with that. I feel I totally understand. I feel it's setting in already. So I'm pushing myself. I'm not getting bogged down, for instance, with sticking with Logic. I've only recently started using Reaper because, again, a problem occurred on a project. I had to edit a bunch of dialogue emotes for a character, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm literally spending half my life getting around the limitations of this software, whereas I can do this in Reaper in like literally half an hour. So, and I guess that's the circumstances pushed me towards that, and I'm glad I'm doing it, because I'm glad I'm always learning and keeping ahead of things, because there's no way out. I don't think we could be lazy. There will be a point where we get caught out eventually, one way or another.
Yeah, most probably. I'm also having Reaper on my list of things to do, but yeah, the pain isn't heavy enough yet. So
that's it, and that's fine. That's fine. I think that's okay. It's all, the only thing that matters is the way it sounds in the game. If that still sounds good and you're not, killing yourself over it, then I think you're fine.
Yeah. Speaking of good sound, let's talk about your love for metal music.
Yes.
Because I love metal as well, and I've been to so many concerts, and especially nowadays when we see soundtracks that have those metal influences or metal music that is not just, like you said, not just a track put in there, but like adaptive music. And you already mentioned Mick Gordon, which is like the Doom soundtrack is absolutely amazing, and I think even non-audio people know that kind of sound and style. So yeah, maybe for you, how does your musical taste influence your work in game audio?
I think enormously. I think enormously. I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the stuff I've worked on feels aggressive and larger than life, and all of that stuff, and combat. There's just been a lot of combat, really, if I think about it. So I think massively in terms of music, like almost completely. Like I still, although I went to university, I studied like post minimalism and all of that, and I find that really interesting for sure. But it's some of it's applicable, but not a lot of it in terms of like when I actually have to write. For instance, the stuff for Elder Souls was very orchestral, but I did it in my own way. I didn't kid myself. I didn't think like, I haven't been classically trained. I'm not going to pretend to understand how to use every instrument of the orchestra, nor did it really, interest me that much. Going to university, you think, oh God, I really want to learn how to do orchestration, really learn how to create music like idiomatically for like every single instrument so that it could be played live and all of this. And then again, coming back to the thing, like the only thing that matters is the way it sounds, right? The end result at the end of the day. And I realized that wasn't helping me. If anything, it was leading me away from that vision. It was a distraction. I wasn't focusing on what actually served the game. I was focusing on how to make this as accurately, musically speaking as possible. So I fell back on what my musical heritage is. I think everybody should focus on that. What your background is, from like the thing that you started listening to music, the thing that you latched onto, the thing that brought you here. And for me, it was heavy music always. So I thought, great, why don't I start listening to a bunch of heavy music? So I started picking up, listening up again to like Machine Head, Trivium, Slipknot, all the bands that I listened to when I was young and I still listen to now. And I thought, how can I take this influence and put it into the work that I'm doing? And the first part of Elder Souls was definitely how that started. And then I think the DLC, I wrote like 3 tracks and I leaned into that even more. Like Joel, who mixes all of my stuff, and I work with him. We work together now at Double Jump Audio, the collective that I started. He basically took my vision and made it a reality, if that was, and I'm going to post some more videos about how we got to that stage, but almost completely, like from the rhythms, for instance, like you realize that Stravinsky was completely correct. He was like something about, good composers create music and the great ones copy or steal or whatever it's however he phrased it, right? Basically he was like, steal people's ideas. That's it. There are lots of ideas out there, just take them. And what he means by that, what I think he means by that, is listen to other music that you like and take ideas from it that at the end of the day is not going to sound anything like the original idea. And I think that's totally normal. That's to be expected. Coming into a much bigger point now that's coming into my head is a lot of young composers and students come to me and be like, I want to write like Hans Zimmer, for instance, and that name gets thrown a lot. For instance, let's talk about him because he's the biggest composer, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but you're also giving yourself like so much pressure because Hans Zimmer or Mick Gordon or whoever else, Winifred Phillips and other composers who have been spent decades now working in the industry, have spent all of that time cultivating their sound. So of course they know what they're doing and they've got to this stage, but they've spent all those years, like, and for you to just put all this pressure to be like, I need to be original, I need to try and be like them straight away is insane. Instead, why not just focus on who you are? What does that mean to you? Maybe you come up with something, A, that you will enjoy more because you're not fighting against who you are and the things that you love to write. And then maybe just maybe you create something new. But I think that's not the focus. Creating something new is not the focus. So I just went back on that. I said, I want to write music that I would enjoy listening to and that I would enjoy writing. So I went to these bands like Machine Head, for instance, and Lamb of God, and I just ripped rhythms off of their tracks from like the guitars or the drums, and I put them into violins, for instance, or maybe into the horns. And I was like, you know what? The horn isn't meant to be played in this fashion, but I don't care because it sounds good. And I'm going to put some distortion on it because I'm a psychopath and it works,
That sounds pretty good to me, yeah. And like, are there any specific elements of metal music that you find particularly interesting or maybe even challenging to incorporate into game soundtracks? Because, I mean, especially with metal, you have sometimes even mathematical, metal songs that have need a certain amount of space or a certain amount of time to really shine. And if you have like dynamic music that can change,
Yeah, for sure. Like, for instance, working on Elder Souls, which was the first soundtrack and adaptive piece of music that I ever wrote, I realized that I didn't, again, pay attention to the experience and the testing that was going on, the gameplay experience, because I realized that players would finish most of the boss fights within 2 to 3 minutes. And I had in some tracks like a 7-minute, like my version of like Master of Puppets epic. And I was like, nobody's heard half the track because they finished before then. So I'm like, great. So what a waste of time. Even if I put all these loops and adaptive changes, like no one's going to hear it. So I guess I try to condense it, and I've tried to be a lot catchier and shorter. So rather than coming up with, I don't know, for instance, one of my favorite bands of all time, like right now, is still Gojira, the French band, and they're
Oh yes.
right, super technical and like, but I love how direct they are. Like all their ideas are kind of, everybody's kind of playing towards almost like one single idea, and I love that because it just sounds so strong and forceful and just just powerful, right? It really feels like a wall of sound, and I love that. So, and that's great, but obviously that takes maybe 5 minutes to really, drill in that kind of idea into somebody's head, that kind of like thing that Meshuggah does a lot of, that kind of just repetitive, just like by the end of it, you're just like, okay, I get it. So, but maybe that doesn't always translate. Whereas, songs like stuff the Machine Head does, for instance, is super catchy. They have really catchy melodies that can be sold to a listener maybe in a shorter amount of time. So I guess I've been trying to go with that. Also with the thinking, I don't know who said this, but it's the idea that you should recognize a song or understand what a song is within like the first 5-10 seconds, that kind of catchiness. I think that's at least what I've learned from specifically scoring boss fights, which last like 3 minutes, right? You don't have a lot of time, so don't mess about, just get into it.
That makes sense. And when you're done designing the audio and the music for a game, how do you balance between creating audio that complements the atmosphere, but also making it stand out on its own, especially for the music?
So the first thing I always serve is the gameplay, right? Is the mix, and I'm getting into that a lot more. Like I just finished reading as well, Alex Rivier's book Game Audio Mixing, which is just sums up everything that you need to know really in a nutshell really, really well. And that book, for instance, and other resources will tell you that the most important thing is the overall experience. So if one thing sticks out, if the music's super catchy and it sticks out and it's distracting, that's a loss, right? You've lost in that sense. And I liken it to playing bass. I was a bass player, by the way, in the bands. And I think my favorite compliments at the end of the night was, oh man, your band you sounded huge. You sounded so good. I'm like, oh, awesome. That's great. And then other people would be like, oh yeah, the bass was just so loud. It's just so thundering. And I'm like, oh shit. Like I didn't do the right thing because I stuck out. I shouldn't be sticking out. I should be supporting. I should be the unsung hero. And I think audio should do the same in most of the time. I think you should remember how you felt playing a video game more than specificities about like the music and the sound design. Particularly, if you've played a game 5 years ago, I don't remember some of the sounds from the games and the music that I play from, I don't know, 5 years, for instance, games that I played 5 years ago, but I remember how I felt. Yeah. And that was because none of the audio stuck out and distracted me. It didn't break my immersion. So, I think that's what you asked me, right, in the question?
Yeah. I think it's also, that's something that always meant, like especially in the past, that if you made good audio, then nobody notices. So that also means that a lot of us audio folk are, like you said, like unsung heroes.
The bass
and
player.
I've talked about this with Mark Mangini as well, and with other audio people, especially from movies. Foley is even more extreme in that sense, that if you notice Foley in a movie, in very, very rare instances, it has like an artistic value and it is something noticeable. But normally you should like not be noticed at all. So you've put many hours of effort into audio and nobody notices. And then you did a good job, which is so weird to me.
Until maybe you get nominated for an award and they're like, oh, I guess the audio is pretty good. Maybe I should listen to it again.
Yeah, maybe that's how it works. I have no idea. Yeah.
I was watching a post from In-Depth Sound Design on Instagram. Actually, Mike Mangini was in this one talking about Mark Mangini. Right. Mike is Dream Theater.
Yes.
We could talk about Dream Theater as well. But Mark Mangini was talking about their work, the Foley, specifically on Blade Runner, the new one, the new Blade Runner. Yeah. And I didn't notice that watching the scene. I obviously felt how cool the scene was. Like the initial scene where Dave Bautista's character, well, I won't spoil it, but are we allowed to spoil movies? Whatever. There was just this amount of Foley in the room that you don't notice, like stuff rattling in the room, and you're like, holy shit, like that's all down to the sound design, like, and you don't notice it, but I felt it, or at least, nothing. It made sense to me when I was watching it. I find that super fascinating. I love that. I love not being noticed, as long as the developers understand what your value is. Because if they don't notice, then we'd be out of a job, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, normally when someone notices, it's like this sound, I don't think it fits. So normally that's the case when something really sticks out. But otherwise, you get those comments like, "Oh, the atmosphere is really cool. That works really well." And I think that's what we want to strive for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're doing then your own projects or your paid projects, and you're also creating tutorials. So how do you manage your time between those different works?
I think we lightly touched on this before we started this conversation.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's just a revolving process. I think working on your own provides you with a lot of challenges that you have to you can't ignore yourself. You can't ignore the way you work, the way you learn, and you can't ignore listening to your body as well. So I think that's the first thing. Listening to yourself and understanding your limitations. When you are tired, like, rest. Okay, when you're hungry, eat. When you're thirsty, drink. Like, don't forget all these primal instincts that are really important to us as human beings. Because if we don't have the right setup, then doing any work is going to be difficult, especially motivating yourself on your own. So the way lately that's been working for me is trying to dedicate 1 day per one thing. That's something that has worked for a while. So, like, for instance, on Tuesdays, I will try and do all of my meetings, all of my conversations. Like, I think we're doing this on a Tuesday. So I know that Tuesdays will be the time that I will try and push all of my calls. If somebody wants to talk to me, a client or a student or whatever, I'll try and put it all on Tuesdays. And then other projects are dedicated to the projects that I'm working on. And then I try to give myself at least half a day or a day on the personal projects, like creating more courses or more newsletters or more tutorials, promoting myself, stuff like that. So I try to dedicate like 1 day per each. That's a lot easier to focus on. So you're not stressing about, oh, do I have an appointment later? Do I have a call that I'm about to miss, etc., etc. Aside from that, every morning I try to start with an hour of networking online. So that could be messaging people that I've never met before, completely cold messaging people the right way, by the way, not just asking for work. I never do that. That doesn't work. But we can talk about that maybe in another time. But just networking, following up on friends and colleagues and new contacts and possible leads to projects that I have, like, cooking up on the side, and just making sure that I am keeping myself connected. Because if you want to be freelance, there's a lot more work behind the scenes. There's no doubt about that. There's definitely more work than working somewhere full time. But the advantage is the payoff is huge because we get to control our time a lot more. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You get more flexibility, but within that, some people don't like having so much freedom and flexibility. They prefer to have more structure. So you just have to remember to give yourself that structure in one way or another. Planning has helped me a lot. I don't know about you, Ben, but I'm planning everything, making sure everything's written down, and I have a task. I'm trying to do way more organization in terms of like my digital space. I've just been going through the whole Para method, if you're familiar with that, and it's just absolutely changed everything that I do, from like note taking to like projects, and making sure that everything feels organized so that when I leave my desk, I know that I can come back to it and I know what I'm going to be doing, because there's going to be something staring me in the face, not sitting down and being like, okay, what the heck do I do today? If that makes sense. Yeah, it's an ongoing process. There's plenty of techniques. I think you just try one, see how it works, and then move on.
I'm not familiar with the para technique, but I'm doing the same thing. I have like different columns in my to-do list for different types of work. For example, this podcast and the projects and so on. And so I always have an overview of what is open and what is most important. And then what I also like to do is something that I don't remember anymore who gave me that tip, but it was really amazing. It was like, keep a simple task open if it's not important. Because if you're stuck at some point, you can just do that task. And if you have a day where it's like, oh, I'm not creative, I can't finish that, I have no idea how to do that ambience or that sound, then you can do that just that little task, and you at least accomplished that day. And that's something I always try to keep those little small tasks open and not do them right away, to keep them for that moments when I'm like, I'm not motivated to edit 2 hours of podcasts or anything else. So I'm gonna do that. That's fine. Then I'm gonna have a slow day, but I still felt like I did something productive for my business, and yeah.
That's good. That's good. I'm gonna steal that. That's a really good idea.
Of course.
Because yeah, the other thing that's helped me is to find out, again, listening to your body, finding out when your high energy moments are, right? Because it's not just a question of get up, start working at 9, finish at 5, and that's it. Everybody's different. So I realized, for instance, I have the most energy in the morning. Not super early, like I can't get up early, but I know when, like, you know, between like 9 to 12, that's like my go time. Like, you know, give me just 1 cup of coffee and that's it. I'm just there locked in. After lunch, for instance, I just don't have that much energy. So I put the most difficult tasks and creatively taxing tasks in the morning. That's why I do my networking in the morning as well, because I'll be the most motivated. I'll be the less, that's the least likely time during the day that I will be encouraged to say no, right? There's less resistance. I'm like, no, I have plenty of energy. Come on, you can send a few messages, right? So yeah, high energy moments, not just when you're awake, if that makes sense. Figuring out, because maybe, I don't know, maybe you work better in the evening after dinner, and that's fine. So just figure out how that can work.
Yes, absolutely. Morning persons, it's like a mystery to me. I mean, lately I've been having more energetic mornings, but I don't have like lunch or breakfast. I have like a middle thing at 11 and nothing too filling, so I don't have that down after a big lunch anymore.
Yeah.
But still, like in the mornings, I try to take it slow and take a cold shower, do some like breathing exercises, do something for myself for mental health, and start the day usually slow. And for me, it's like in the evenings, I start to get creative and I start to get ideas, and I sometimes can work until 3 or 4 a.m. In that very focused state, because I feel like at that time, nobody's going to call me, nobody's going to send me an email, nobody's going to come in the studio and ask me something because the people are asleep. So that's like the time when everything feels so like limitless to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then coming to a question that I like to ask every guest, and I'm interested to hear what you say, is what is the first sound you ever recorded and why did you record it?
It was stepping on cassette tape.
Stepping on cassette tape.
Stepping on cassette tape. So I started writing music, and then I found John and Francesco, who were making Eldest Souls, which at the time was a student project, and they then asked me, like, would you like to do the sound as well, like the audio, like all of it, not just the music? And I was like, okay, fine, why not? Like, at that point I'd seen like a few videos on Facebook about Foley, people doing Foley, you know, people like doing Foley for movies and stuff like that. I thought, yeah, sure, why not? That looks like fun. Like, I tried it, and then I read online that a way to get snow texture was to step on cassette tape. So that's what I did. By the way, I'm not that old. This was a cassette tape, I guess, that my parents had. Okay, I was I was born in the world like just the edge of cassettes. I started using CDs, but you can't step on CDs and make a crunchy sound. So I found a cassette. Just a disclaimer. I found a cassette and I unraveled it and I put all the tape on the floor, and then I started stepping on it with socks, and I recorded that with an SM58. You know, whatever even a mobile phone would have been fine.
Sure.
That was the first time I ever recorded, and I put it, I think it's on my Instagram, but if not, on my YouTube. I've kept the videos up of like the following sounds that I did, which were, after that, it was, I got really into this idea of making Foley and just having fun with it. And again, like, I know we might be talking about field recording and Foley in a minute, but I don't tend to do a lot of it, but I do appreciate how creative and inspiring it gets you. You know, just doing a little bit, because that I caught a little bug at that point, and I was like, I ran into my dad's garage because I was living with my parents still at the time, and I put all bits of like metal and tools in this big pan, and I made these heavy footsteps. And again, it's on my YouTube if anybody wants to see super early animations and gameplay of the student project that we had at the time, and my Foley and how it fits in there. But specifically it was cassette tape, stepping on that.
That's awesome. And did it sound like snow? Did it work?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know nearly enough about processing and editing to make it sound, I guess, convincing, but it was definitely the start, you know? And that's also interesting how you find a source that has to be, I don't know, if it's 70% there, like if you like squinted your ears, if there's even a way to do that, I don't know how to explain it, but like from a distance, if somebody played that sound, you'd be like, oh, they're stepping on something crunchy, maybe grass or snow, maybe it was grass even, I don't know. But it's interesting how like good source material, it's so true, right? Good source material really does 70% of the job, and then you just have to make sure it fits in your mix and in your context, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned like field recording as well. Did you also do some field recording already? How do you find it?
I mean, my extent of field recording was like going into a field with a microphone. I guess that's the actual definition of it. So yeah, I guess I did, but I never invested too much time and effort into that. Like, aside from like getting a shotgun mic and getting various mics actually, so I can record in the studio whenever I had an idea or something. But I kind of found later on that I preferred working from libraries, and this comes back to like this idea of figuring out where you want to stop learning, I guess, or what you want to focus on. I think that's a better way of putting it. What you want to focus and specialize in. And I realized because I'm coming from music, I don't want to let that go. But I'm also very appreciative of the fact that being a sound designer is its own career. You can dedicate a whole career like Mark Mangini and other people have done, and just be good at that. So I didn't want to kid myself thinking I could do both. I think that's a little bit arrogant of me anyway, personally. There are people out there who can do it, but that's not me. So splitting my time between the things that I'm good at in music and then the things that I'm good at in sound design, everything else I want to supplement with things that are going to make those two my focus, basically. So for instance, I'm never been that interested, nor have I been that good at mixing my music, for instance. But I have a friend called Joel who's amazing at this. And Joel, for that reason, I work with him. And he makes me sound better because of that, right? And same thing with sound design. I have this now plethora of libraries online, specific libraries. Like I love going on a sound effect, for instance, and finding a really cool library specific to something that I'm working on. And I know that person has recorded all of this Foley, because it is Foley, it is field recording, but they've just done it for you. And they've used, fantastic equipment, they've used fantastic techniques, and they've dedicated themselves to that craft so that my work can sound better. So I take solace in the fact that my value as a sound designer and game audio professional is sourcing the right libraries and then editing them in the right way that fits the adaptive system that I'm creating. And I'm very satisfied with that process.
That makes sense, yeah. I mean, for me, it's like I really fell in love with the whole recording part of it. So I'm doing a lot of field recording and Foley recording, but I also, I personally draw the line at the more, I would say, extreme stuff like explosions, fire, and stuff like that. And then that is where I'm using libraries, because in the past I thought about maybe going down that route, but that's not what I really want to do. Like just having this, but what I like is having the option of saying, okay, I need this specific ambience. I could like buy a wind ambience, but I know that really great spot, and I'm gonna record it, and it's just gonna be this specific recording from me, and nobody else is gonna have it. So yeah, that's my MO, so to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally get that. Because especially just like you said, you need a lot of equipment, you need a lot of time, you need to spend time on learning how to record stuff, and I'm learning new things every time I go out recording. It's it's just an endless field. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure I totally get that. That's super inspiring, super creative. I think what did it for me as well was the fact that if I'm working on 2 or 3 projects and I want to do that for every project, I can't keep that up. It's very time consuming. And it's mainly, it's not something that I tended to enjoy. I much preferred focusing on the bigger picture, which again is why I set up Double Jump Audio, so that I can put myself in that position where I can kind of look after the direction of everything, kind of like as a lead or director role perhaps, but I don't really, in the sense that I'm making sure that everything is heading towards the vision that we have collectively. But then I have these really great colleagues that I can bring alongside who are going to make the project better because they are excellent at what they do specifically, and you're sharing your information and your talents and ideas amongst each other, which is, I think, where the best work is created. I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the best audio out there at times is done by such a team of talented people doing very specific things.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to specialize without having to give up music or sound design. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Specializing in
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
center kind of
Yeah.
area.
I mean, for me, for example, I don't do music at all. I mean, I make a little bit of ambience here and there and a little bit of beats, if
Cool.
you could call them. But I realized early on that music isn't my field. I really enjoy music, a lot of music, different music and complex music. But I understood that making music is not the thing that I want to do. But yeah, just like you say, I'm working with people that make great music. I can implement them. We can work together on creating something that in the end sounds amazing, and I'm happy to be just the tiny part of the implementer, because especially for like full-time musicians, they are not really into using something like FMOD and setting up stuff, of course, because it's all a bit too much coding and too much
Sure.
like engineering. And for me, that's like, yeah, not a problem at all, and I really enjoy that. So having that kind of synergy is just, yeah, it's just great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'm all out of topics for today. So the only thing that is left for me to ask is, do you have any shout-outs, any upcoming projects, anyone you want to especially say hello to or something?
Shout outs. Oh, wow. Nothing I can actually mention at this time. Well, I'm finishing up, actually, I can mention that. I'm finishing up sound design on a game called Railroute, which has been an amazing challenge because it really feels like just one big user interface. And wow, UI is just another challenge in itself. Like trying to fit information and make it clear, and also try and squeeze in some narrative in the space of like milliseconds each sound. It was definitely an interesting challenge, and I learned a lot from that. So yeah, that's already in early access. It's actually coming out like at the end of in February, I believe. Apart from that, I just want to give a shout out to, again, I sound like a broken record, but the Air Wiggles community, because that for the last year or so has been such a source of strength and inspiration. It's been great to meet people, including yourself. Like, again, I think, I think, yeah, we made contact on there, right? So
Yeah,
there you
absolutely.
go. Just goes to show. And yeah, just, and yeah, I think that's it. Wow. I don't know. There's other stuff cooking, but I can't say it, or it's not really the time to say. So
Sure.
yeah, just if anybody wants to reach out to me, Airwiggles or Twitter or Instagram, hit me up, and that's where I share stuff and tutorials. I'm always happy to hear from people who have questions about getting started in the industry. And I guess, yeah, if that's where if you want to start building your career, I also have a newsletter where I send out a bunch of stuff weekly, just telling people how to find their first gig, basically.
Awesome. Then thank you again for taking the time, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting on patreon.com/fieldandfoley or ko-fi.com/fieldandfoley, where you gain early access to episodes in lossless format and can submit questions for our guests. Thank you for listening.